In 1315, Europe's most powerful army marched confidently into a narrow mountain pass. By nightfall, its knights were dead, defeated by farmers, shepherds, and villagers. This was not luck, this was the perfect ambush. Chapter 1. The Army That Could Not Lose. In 1315, the Habsburg army represented everything medieval Europe believed in: wealth, nobility, steel, horses bred for war, knights trained from childhood to kill in armor. Duke Leopold I commanded an army that symbolized imperial order itself. Wherever this army marched, resistance usually ended before battle began. To the Habsburg court, the Swiss were not a nation, they were an inconvenience. The mountain cantons, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden, were small, poor, and politically insignificant in the eyes of Vienna. Their refusal to submit to Habsburg authority was seen not as rebellion, but as childish disobedience. This campaign was meant to be a lesson, not a war. The nobles expected a quick march, a brief confrontation, and an easy victory. The knights believed their armor made them untouchable, their horses made them unstoppable, their titles made them superior. They did not consider that superiority creates blindness. The Swiss militias had no shining armor, no banners of empire, no royal bloodlines. They were farmers who plowed frozen soil, hunters who tracked animals in snow, woodcutters who understood balance, weight, and gravity. Men who climbed mountains daily, not for glory, but for survival. They understood something the Habsburgs did not. A knight fights for honor. A peasant fights because he has no future if he loses. The Swiss knew they could not defeat the Habsburgs in open fields. They knew cavalry would crush them. They knew traditional battle meant extinction, so they rejected tradition. They studied terrain, they studied movement, they studied fear, and instead of preparing to fight like soldiers, they prepared to fight like mountains. The Habsburg army marched forward, convinced of victory. The Swiss waited, already victorious in strategy. Chapter 2. The Mountain Trap. The Swiss did not choose Morgarten by accident. They chose it because it was cruel. The Morgarten Pass was not a road built for armies. It was a narrow mountain path pressed between a steep hillside and the dark waters of Lake Egerie. On one side, rock walls climbed sharply upward. On the other, wet ground swallowed careless footsteps. There was no space to turn, no space to retreat, no space to regroup. For cavalry, it was a nightmare. The Habsburg army depended on horses, formation, and momentum. But in Morgarten, horses slipped, lines broke, speed disappeared. Armor that once protected now exhausted the men wearing it. The Swiss understood physics better than politics. They climbed above the pass days before the army arrived. They carried heavy stones, tree trunks, sharpened stakes, and long halberds. They positioned themselves in silence, hidden among trees and rocks. From above, they could see everything. From below, the Habsburgs could see nothing. This was not a battlefield. It was a corridor of execution. When the first knights entered the pass, they believed they were still marching. They did not realize they had already lost. The narrow path forced the army into a single stretched column. The front could not see the back. The back could not see the front. Commands dissolved into echoes. The Swiss waited. They did not wait for courage. They waited for density. When enough armored men were trapped inside the funnel, the mountains moved. Rocks crashed down. Logs rolled like falling walls. Horses screamed. Knights fell. The proud Habsburg column collapsed into chaos without ever seeing its enemy. The Morgarten Pass had done what no army could. It had turned power into helplessness. Chapter 3. When the ambush began, dawn arrived without warning. Mist still clung to the slopes of Morgarten when the Habsburg column moved deeper into the pass. The knights believed the danger was behind them. The Swiss were nowhere to be seen. The mountain looked silent. Too silent. Then the mountain moved. From above, massive rocks began to roll, not dropped in chaos, but released with intent. Tree trunks followed, tumbling like living, battering rams. Horses screamed and reared. Armor turned from protection into a prison. Men were pushed into each other, into mud, into water. The long column fractured into panic. There was no enemy in front, only gravity, only confusion, only fear. The Habsburg formation collapsed before a single Swiss weapon was raised. Then the Swiss appeared. They did not charge like knights. They moved like hunters. They descended in small groups, fast and focused. Their halberds and spears were designed for close combat, for pulling riders from saddles, for striking where armor was weakest. But more than weapons, they used positioning. They attacked from higher ground, from blind angles, from places no cavalry could counter. The elite soldiers of Europe tried to regroup. They tried to form lines. They tried to command. But commands cannot travel through terror. The lake blocked retreat. The slope blocked advance. The pass became a cage. Within hours, the battle was decided, not by numbers, not by status, but by preparation. The Swiss suffered remarkably few losses. The Habsburg army, once unstoppable, dissolved into retreat and disbelief. Survivors would later say they never truly saw the enemy, only shadows moving between rocks and fog. Morgarten was not just a victory, it was a message. It told Europe that discipline could defeat nobility, that knowledge could defeat armor, and that a free people defending their land could destroy an empire's pride in a single morning. History had not merely changed, it had shifted direction. Chapter 4. Why this victory shocked Europe. News of Morgarten did not travel like a victory report. It traveled like a rumor no one wanted to believe. Across Europe, courts and castles struggled to accept what had happened. An army of armored knights, trained since childhood for war, had been defeated by farmers, shepherds, and town militias, not through luck, not through betrayal, but through planning. For centuries, European warfare was built on a single assumption. Nobility meant superiority. Knights were believed to be natural rulers of the battlefield. Their armor, horses, and bloodlines were considered proof of destiny. Peasants were meant to serve, not to win. Morgarten shattered that illusion. Military scholars quietly began re-examining everything. Terrain was no longer background, it became a weapon. Discipline became more valuable than decoration. Cooperation became more important than rank. The idea that common men could organize, hold formations, and defeat professional elites was revolutionary. The shock was not only military, it was political. If peasants could defeat knights, then peasants could resist lords. If villages could defend themselves, then empires were no longer untouchable. Morgarten planted a dangerous idea in European minds. Power was not inherited, it could be earned. For the Swiss, this victory did more than protect territory. It unified cantons that had once been divided. It created a shared identity built on defense, cooperation, and independence. The Swiss Confederation was no longer just a pact, it was now a force. For the Habsburgs, Morgarten became a quiet wound. They would return many times to try and erase the humiliation. They would fail again and again. And for Europe, the battlefield of Morgarten marked the beginning of a slow transformation, from feudal dominance to citizen resistance. The world had not yet changed completely, but it had been warned. Chapter 5. The birth of Swiss identity. After Morgarten, something changed inside the mountains. The Swiss cantons were no longer just neighbors bound by convenience. They were partners bound by blood, memory, and survival. The men who returned from the battlefield carried more than weapons. They carried proof that unity could defeat. Chapter 6. The lesson of Morgarten. Morgarten teaches one brutal truth. Power collapses when it becomes arrogant. The Habsburgs did not lose because they were weak. They lost because they believed they were untouchable. Their army was larger, their armor was stronger, their lineage was noble, their confidence was absolute, and that confidence blinded them. They saw peasants, not soldiers. They saw mountains, not battlefields. They saw obedience, not resistance. In their minds, the Swiss were already defeated. But history does not reward confidence, it rewards awareness. The Swiss understood their limits. They knew they could not win on open ground. They knew they could not match cavalry charge for charge, so they refused to fight on terms written by their enemy. Instead, they rewrote the battlefield itself. Morgarten proves that terrain. Chapter 7. Final reflection. When giants forget to look down. Morgarten reminds us of a truth that empires always learn too late. Power does not disappear because it is attacked. Power disappears when it forgets to question itself. The Habsburg army did not walk into the mountain pass expecting defeat. They walked in expecting obedience. Their armor shined. Their banners carried centuries of authority. Their commanders spoke with the confidence of men who had never imagined losing to peasants with wooden shields. They believed strength was permanent. They believed rank was destiny. They believed fear was loyalty. But history does not respect belief. It respects awareness. What they did not understand was that the Swiss were not trying to win a battle. They were trying to survive. And survival produces a different kind of intelligence, one that does not follow rules written by those in power. Morgarten was not just an ambush. It was a lesson in perspective. It proved that the battlefield is not chosen by the strongest, but by the smartest. It showed that discipline can defeat tradition, that unity can defeat hierarchy, and that preparation can defeat prestige. The Swiss did not win because they had better weapons. They won because they had better awareness. They knew their mountains, they knew their paths, they knew their limitations, and they knew that fighting like knights would only guarantee their death, so they fought like locals, like survivors, like men who had already accepted the cost of resistance. From that moment, Switzerland began to exist not just as land, but as identity. Its independence was not born in a palace, it was born on a slope, among rocks and fog, where ordinary people decided that submission was no longer acceptable. Morgarten teaches us that history is not shaped only by emperors. It is shaped when ordinary people refuse to remain invisible. Even today, in a world ruled by corporations, algorithms, and modern empires, the lesson remains unchanged. Those who understand their terrain, political, economic, cultural, or digital, control their future, and those who forget where they stand eventually fall. If this hidden chapter of history changed the way you see power, subscribe to the hidden chapter, like this video, and share it with those who still believe power always wins. Because history proves, awareness does.